ICPC names the Nigerian judiciary as the most corrupt sector on the Nigerian Corruption Index between 2018 and 2020. And governors of northeastern states also advocate for the use of mercenaries in the fight against insecurity. This is Plus Politics. I am Kayode Ladeinde. Welcome. This is Plus Politics. Let's look at some of the top stories on the front burner. The Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, says that the judicial sector is currently on top of the Nigerian Corruption Index between 2018 and 2020. The anti-corruption agency claimed that its survey it carried out, almost 10 billion naira was offered and paid as bribes by lawyers. According to the agency, 6 female judges reported that they were offered over 3 billion naira, while 5 male judges noted that almost 400 million naira were offered to them. These and more details were contained in a report titled Nigeria Corruption Index, Report of a Pilot Survey. Joining us to discuss these is and to also look at other recommendations that need to be made concerning this disturbing report, we have Mr. Dele Farotimi. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
And also joining us in this conversation via phone is Mr. Kolade Olutekunbi, another lawyer. Good evening.
Good evening, Kayode.
Yeah, let's start with this opening remark from both of you. But let me start with Mr. Dele Farotimi. What's your comment? I follow you closely, and I still remember some of the things you said on October 1st here in this studio about the judiciary. What do you make out of this report coming from ICPC?
Well, you know, when the like of us are speaking, and it's very easy to dismiss some of the things I will say. I guess we look like the insane enough to have our opinions dismissed as rabble-rousing, noise-making, and all of that. But when you have a man, an acclaimed scholar like Professor Owasonye, an appointee of another genius, the current vice president, you need to listen when the likes of them begin to talk. And when they are talking and is reflective of the things that one has been bellyaching about for some years, and you are now hearing institutional bodies set up by Nigerian law, peopled by Nigerians, appointed by the same government, speak so starkly about just how far we've gone down the line of infamy, then it's sufficient reason for any wise persons to sit down and really take very candid look at our situation. It's not just the judiciary, but let me just allow my learned colleague to have his say. But really, I think it's gotten to that point where we need to just tell ourselves the truth. We can't continue like this.
Okay.
If the judiciary is lost, what's left?
Awesome. I was just going to remind you, and you, like you said, just for the record of those who probably didn't listen to that particular submission you made, that since the judiciary is also part of the society, is only a reflection of what we suffer as a society. But let me listen to Mr. Kolade Olutekunbi. This is, I don't know, let me not put words into your mouth. What's the reaction to this? For some of us, it's revelation.
Well, I first and foremost, I want to agree with my latter friend who spoke earlier. It's very worrisome when you get this kind of report coming out from ICPC, who incidentally is headed by a professor of law. It's very worrisome. It's also disturbing to note that this is coming up. But some of us are not really surprised that, yes, we have serious issue in the judiciary, and we know that judiciary requires reforms. But to state the report as the worst sector and the worst, I don't know how they put it, whether it's the worst electoral sector that is most corrupt, that would be a begging question. Because I believe that if you look at their report, they hang it on politicians giving bribes or attempting to bribe them. So the point is that if these were, some of them, reported that they were offered money, why didn't ICPC swing up and arrest those people and prosecute them? Why making it a report? Arrest those guys who are the ones that people have offered them bribe. People offered the bribe to them. They should arrest those people who offered the bribe to them and prosecute them. Because by the time you generalize, like the judiciary is corrupt, is that we have honest and people of high character, high character standing amongst a lot of them. Not all of them. So if you get these ones that have come out, or those ones that you have investigated that have even collected the money, then you prosecute
and get them
they don't enjoy
prosecuted.
immunity from prosecution.
Okay. Mr. Olutekobe, I'll come back to you. Let me go back to Mr. Farotimi. Mr. Farotimi, let's fill us in on this chain of bribery and corruption and whatever language you can use for it. We have a case, and put us through, if we are just speculating, we have a case of when you have a case, you're being charged by a particular lawyer, and we understand from speculation that the money that you'll be charged includes the money you will use, pardon my language, to sort the bench, so to say, for you to win this particular case. So where does the corruption start? Is it the client itself or the lawyer who makes those, bogus demands on the client?
I've always loved my Yoruba proverbs. I travel back into my Yoruba folklores and proverbs when I'm asked these kind of questions. Yorubas will say that Amukun Eruewo Oni Orile Nwo Ewo Sale. That means they're asking the cripple that the load on his head is imbalanced, and he says it's lopsided. So he says to them, you are focused on what is on my head. You're not looking at my feet. When we speak of corruption in Nigeria as though it be some phenomenon that is restricted to one part of our country, it's actually fraudulent. The Nigerian judiciary is reflective of the Nigerian press, is reflective of the Nigerian police, is reflective of the Nigerian custom, is reflective of the Nigerian mechanic. Each and every member of the Nigerian judiciary is a Nigerian, born and bred in Nigeria, raised by our system. He is reflecting, he is who we are. That is who we are. When we speak of Owasoye's finding, when the ICPC finding, it's because we speak of it as though it be in isolation. If you actually went back, as far back as 2017, Owasoye, let me quote him. In 2017, Owasoye said the prison decongestion project, situated in the Federal Ministry of Justice for a number of years, gobbled billions over a 5 to 6 year period without impacting the prison system.
Wow.
Look, the truth of the matter is that corruption is not peculiarly Nigerian. What is peculiarly Nigerian is impunity. When people are above the law and nobody bothers to call them to order or to hold them to account. So when you now have judges in that kind of system appointed by people who exercises powers that must not be accounted for, you can be sure that they are always going to make sure that the persons who we ask them in terms of judicial officers whom they appoint would always be people who are malleable or who are already compromised. So the reality is that it is almost impossible to have a judge who is just come through an unjust system to come to the bench. You would have the exceptions, no doubt about that. But when the report says that the thing is systemic, it's not saying anything new unless we want to fool ourselves. The reality is that every country would get the kind of systems that it has built. We have built a system that is not intended for keeping laws. It's intended for ensuring that there are two tracks of law. When Onoge was being chased around and he needed to sue, can you see the speed with which his cases were assigned and heard? What about people who have been in prison for 6 years and haven't even had their cases heard by any judge? The first condition of justice is speed. Where is the speed? Where is the speed?
Okay, Mr. Farotimi, quite a lot of questions. Yes, quite a lot of questions have been raised beyond the issue of bribe. Mr. Oluchakubi, he has just raised another dimension to this discussion, which has to do with inequality, which has to do with two set of laws made for people. And we are asking this question, and I must say this for record, that judiciary seems to be quite fair and really, really criticizing itself. You hardly get this among the other arms of government. They will tell you that there's brotherliness. So staying on critiquing the judiciary arm of government, how do we describe this arm of government as the last hope of the masses if you are having these kind of issues?
Well, they don't forget that, like I said, whatever problem the judiciary is having right now, you don't generalize it. These are peculiar to certain group of individuals that have been identified. And my stake is that if you find out that they are being pressured, you see, the law is always there. And irrespective of who has committed an offense, there are rules of bringing that individual to justice. Never whether the person is a judge or is a clergy or is a journalist. An offense is an offense. The issue of bribery and corruption has to do with our individual instincts and person. It doesn't have to do with the fact that you are a member of the judiciary. But
Mr. Oluchakubi, let me interject a bit. Mr. Oluchakubi, let me interject a bit and help my layman's understanding of this whole discussion. For example, if you're talking about some level of lawlessness, if you're going into the religious circle, you will express some bit of surprise when you see the clergyman and the clergywoman being involved in some kind of nefarious activities. Now, we are talking about, how are they described? Now, they are described as justices in the temple. I mean, they are described as priests and priestesses in the temple of justice. So should such things be identified? We're talking about 5 female judges.
Yes, that's what I was saying. That at that level of responsibility, a judge is someone who sits in the temple of justice, someone who is expected to be above board, someone whose character and integrity is supposed to be impeccable, someone who the society look up to as the models of behaviors and actions. So the question is that the character of individual, yes, that is what is an issue here. It doesn't have to do with, yes, I agree with you that this individual happens to be judges, but it still has to boil down to the same thing, the character and the character of that person. Because when you are a judge, it doesn't take your character away from you. You still know who you are. But you have an oath of office, which you have assumed to administer justice without fear or favor, ill or affection. But when you are clouded with corruptions, you are clouded with bribery, there's no way you can administer justice.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mr. Farotimi, let's look at the bar, so to say. Now, so much has been said about the bench. What about the lawyers who are offering this And it is also easy for lawyers to even distinguish themselves. It is the senior advocates of Nigerians, the senior lawyers that are involved in these. What's the guarantee that the younger lawyers will also not be culpable when they become SAN?
See, the problem with us is that we keep dealing with issues as though these are isolated incidences, as though we are dealing with. This is a systemic problem. When you now talk about lawyers who become SANs, before the SANs who are offering the bribes, before they became SANs, were they not junior lawyers? They started learning before they even left law school. What part of our society is devoid of corruption? We can keep dancing around issues and making it seem like these are individual, isolated issues. It is systemic. The corruption does not begin with electoral petition tribunals. It begins with the magistracy. The magistrate who will take bribe before verifying bail, the one who will take the entire system is designed to facilitate corruption. The bottlenecks at the magistrate level, the bottlenecks in the registries themselves, the inadequate facilities for the judges to function, everything is designed to ensure that discretionary justice is eventually delivered. The moment you make these discretions so immediately available within this corrupt environment, what you are simply doing is that you are hiding the capacity for these persons to fulfill your wishes on the bench. So when we're talking about lawyers, it starts from when before some people leave law school, they already know. If you're already used to giving bribe to every policeman, every registrar of the court, every clerk, every bailiff, the entire system is riddled with corruption. You really cannot achieve anything if you are not willing to play balls with them. So at the end of the day, before the man gets to the point where he has gotten together enough briefs to be able to apply to be an SAN, he is sufficiently steeped in the corruption. And I've said this to you before. The longer you stay in the toilet, the faster you lose your sense of smell. As a people, we have become acculturated to evil. We don't even seem to realize what corruption means any longer. If a person is taken to prison on some sort of, whatever the charge might be, and is not been tried, and is spending a year, 2 years in prison, that's already corruption now. Okay. What do you mean by corruption index? Anything that means that there are impediments to justice. So when you talk about the lawyers, understand that it's an entire process. All of us are getting trained to be acculturated to the corruption, and we've gotten used to it. I doubt there is any lawyer in Lagos today who will claim that he has filed a brief in any court in Lagos who did not have to make some payment that are unreceipted. And you are not making the payment so that people will do what they are not meant to do. You are making the payment so that they will do what they were meant to do, but which they are not willing to do, and there is nobody holding them to account for not doing. So corruption is not only about bribing a judge to do something for you. It's about the entire environment, the entire infrastructure of justice delivery. Please, let me allow the gentleman to have a say.
I'm coming to you now because we are going home now to look at solution. Now, two brilliant points raised by two of you. The issue of being a systemic issue, and we're looking at how do we look at it. According to Mr. Lutakubi, these are individuals, these are isolated people. How do we flush them out, if there's any word like that? Because we saw this current administration made that attempt in the last tenure where judges were invaded. Some people would say that was a move to, to clean the audience table. So how do we solve this problem? I'm coming to you, Mr. Farotimi, to look at how do we resolve this systemic issue. So Lutakubi, out.
Whatever solution we are propounding, or whatever solution that may be required, it still has to be following the rule of law. I do not subscribe to what has happened where some lawlessness, perpetrated by the executive to invade judges' residence for purpose of, fighting of corruption. where did they derive the power from? For me, I believe that everything that needs to be done should be done within the concept and within the provisions of our laws. You know, if there are laws, we have laws. The problem we have is that we are not implementing the laws. Now, for instance, now the ICPC report what follows thereafter? Were they not the same institutions that were given the power to prosecute public servants that are corrupt? So what is the report meant to serve if they are not going to act on it?
Okay, good. So, Mr. Farotimi, like I said, part of the moves we've also seen in the recent time is to have a force line charge. Let's have judiciary to be independent. Let's have judiciary to, you know, to have some kind of direct, you know, charge from the central and not the state. Some believe these are all moves to give judiciary some kind of, you know, financial independence that will not make them get into all these corrupt practices. What other solutions will you envisage?
Yeah, you can give a typhoid fever patient repeated dosages of artemisinin or chloroquine. Is not going to cure his problem. Anything you do to improve the Nigerian judiciary without attention being paid at the same time to the totality of the putrefaction in the Nigerian state, you would have merely succeeded in spitting in the ocean and wasting your time. The corruption of the Nigerian judiciary is not an isolated problem. I'll keep saying that to you. Number one, you can only have a judiciary that delivers to the people when the systemic intention is for the law to rule. When the law is meant to rule, everything will be done to strengthen institutions and to allow institutions to do their work. But when the systemic intention is to ensure that some persons are kept above the law, you will then always ensure that you appoint corrupt judges, malleable judges, and then you create situations that allows for impunity to keep reigning. So there is nothing, everything they are doing, they are all fine. They will work if it were to be the only problem. But the key problem of Nigeria is the refusal to allow the rule of law. Because as you alluded to, there were noises made at the dawn of the Buhari government about corruption and how they were going to fight corruption, and then they started the fight corruptly. Some of the people that the DSS was busy hounding around at midnight, they are still sat on the bench today, the highest court of Nigeria. But they've been scandalized. We all know what went down, even though they are still sat there. So the point is that if they were serious about fighting corruption, if they were serious about ensuring that justice is delivered for all Nigerians, they know exactly what to do. But what they need to do will even begin with their own removals from office. So you can't really expect anything of consequence to come out of this system because it is a systemic overhaul that is required. Not all these tokenist gestures of you are increasing how much they can embezzle within the judiciary by way of, okay, we are allocating more money, or that whatever you are doing, if you do not have an overhaul of the entire system, is a waste of time.
Okay.
That's just it for me. It's a waste of time.
Okay, Mr. Lutekobi, on a final note, maybe in the next 60 seconds, if you can help me with this. Some of the things that we usually say in our own room is to look at the huge number in terms of percentage of lawyers in this current administration. The vice president is a professor of law. We have the minister of Works and Housing, who is also a senior advocate of Nigeria. Definitely the Minister of Justice has to be a lawyer, and a good number of them. And the question is, why didn't we have that judicial reform we earnestly craved for?
Well, the judicial reform is not I don't think it's the functions of the executive. It's a legislative function. That's number one. Number two, it has to come from we, the lawyer ourselves. It has to be a holistic approach from both the bar and the bench. You know, just if you look at the mode of appointment of these judges, like my learned friend says, you know, when you are addressing issues, you start from the root. The appointment of the judges, what happened to, you know, the people they are appointing now, what are they, you know, and they be properly, you know, scrutinized to know their background. You know, that's one thing. What you see now is that people are bringing lists. Anytime they want to do appointment of judges, all the big men will give the list to the governor, the appointed judges. Yes, we know that they still have to do it with the recommendation of the National Judicial Service Commission. But have they been given the hands to work? That's the problem. Have they been allowed to do their constitutional responsibility without interference with the executive? So it is not the executive arms of government that will reform the judiciary. Far beyond it.
Okay.
It's going to be a legislative thing. It is the legislature with all the, you know, bills can be sponsored into the House, even by lawyers, by the NBA, we can sponsor bills into the House on judicial reform.
Okay, thank you so much. Whoever will drive this vehicle, we earnestly crave for a change. I'm afraid my time is up. And Mr. Dele Farotimi, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. I also beg you not to give up on this project, Nigeria. One day, you will have cause to change the narrative. Thank you, Mr. Kolade.
Amen.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your time once again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll take a short break, and when we return, the House of Representatives expresses displeasure on the issue that we will be looking at. So we'll be also looking at the issue of the insecurity in Nigeria. Please don't go anywhere.